Are you muted still?
I'm muted on, man. It's Friday, man. We don't.
What Friday, baby? What's happening? Other
It's going really, really good, man. Today is Friday, the day that we were always looking forward to. Today is actually pretty big milestone. I know it's importance to you as well. It's my dad's birthday, and it's if you're comfortable with sharing it, but I know today is a pivotal day because you've shared with this with me in private.
Yes, it is pivotal. It's my brother, just things in my life. My brother died. Um, it was a pivotal day last year on this time too. Kind of like it's gosh, it's crazy, isn't it? Like it's amazing how dates stick in our mind. But it's a good day, brother. It's a good day. It's yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't thought of that until you mentioned it.
Oh, really? Oh,
Believe
my
it or
bad.
yeah, believe it or not, I hadn't. I've been moving so fast this morning.
Yes.
Just great things. Don't get me wrong, and hence the reason we're a couple way more than a couple minutes late today. But just so many things happening, and it's like it's that. Well, it's like what I think we're going to get into today, anyways. Ryan is that being present, that being in the now, that consciousness that comes with it. And before we get going, welcome to Sales Chatter, the podcast where we aim to help 10,000 sales reps generate $1 million GP in under 12 months. And we do it through Ryan, of course, training, education, and days like today, where it's not just sales books that we read. We talked about it yesterday, shelf help. How many great books are out there that do nothing for people? And today, our intention of the book club is to just create awareness for books that can help you in all aspects of your life, including business. I think that's probably one of the best ways to put it. We are going to do sales books. We're going to do positioning books. We're going to do psychology books. We're going to do everything because that ability to read and harness years of somebody's life in a matter of hours or days or weeks, I think is uncanny in the world. And to consider what you can learn in books for $25 instead of a $4,000 course or a $10,000 mastermind. Personally, I think it's amazing. And I believe there's a specific way that everybody has to read books, and it's unique to them. I dissect them. I know one of the influencers that Ryan and I both follow, he reads the first 2 pages and the last 2 pages, and he decides if that's the book he wants to read. So to me, that's critical when it comes to getting a book and actually harnessing the information and applying the information to your everyday life.
I couldn't agree more. And I love that intention that you said, Dan. And, when we came with the topic of wanting to do a book club, it was really important for us to kind of go with our community and then understand everybody talks about all these books and all these podcasts and things like that, and not putting it to the wayside. And I've been thinking about shelf help since you mentioned it today. So I want to introduce everybody. This is Book Club Fridays. If you're brand new here, what our intention is, like Dan says, is to really kind of educate, training, growing, everything like that. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be reading one book, and then we're gonna start off to see how it kind of goes. But the intention from our end here is to read 2 chapters a week, and then basically have a discussion every single Friday. So the book that we chose is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. You can get this on Amazon. You can get this any local bookstore, even Audible, if you want to listen to your audiobook. That way, whatever you kind of like there. But just a quick summary about it. We're not going to give obviously all the details about the entire book because we got you guys to come on Fridays. But The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle is basically a guide to spiritual awakening. The way that I was reading this book, and this is my second time reading this, but I think I was 15, 16 when I read this book. And it's really a guide that kind of offers a new perspective on life, and then understanding what's our consciousness, what isn't our consciousness, what kind of awakening. And it looks at I call it the monkey mind, Dan, where we kind of have that time where we kind of sit down and we're like, okay, what are we thinking of? Should I grab that phone? Or those intrusive thoughts, or like, hey, is that ex-girlfriend thinking about me? Or should I get that sub for lunch? It's just that controlling that existing mind that kind of goes. And, for me, the reason why I really want to bring this book, I have to shout out my wife, Kashri. She was the one who had this in her library, and I went and grabbed it. And for me, Dan, that I'm constantly working on is really my ego. And that's something I definitely battle with. I'm trying to get rid of it. And it's the thing within us. So, Dan, I know this is what your second or third time?
No, so this is actually my third time reading it, and um, the last time I read it was before COVID, and because I would try and read a book a week. It was kind of like for probably 3 years straight. I read a book a week, um, and I've realized after just reading 2 chapters how pacing myself for a book a week was such the wrong thing to do. Read as you want to read, but as you digest. And that's kind of what my whole thought process was, because I'll tell you, I've got, uh, gosh, 3 pages of notes just on the first 2 chapters. And I went back to my book because what I decided to do was finally I put it on Audible. And I went back to my book, and the stuff I wrote down here wasn't even highlighted because it was so far beyond what my consciousness was at that time, my level of awareness. So, one thing I will tell everybody that's deciding to come on this journey with us is this is a very deep book. It's very spiritual, not religious,
Yeah.
spiritual. And more than ever, I would say some of you are ready for it, and probably many of you aren't. And I don't mean that in an ill context or anything. It's just some of the things that are said. I remember when I first read Raymond Hollywell's Working with the Law, and it's the laws of the universe. And I thought I was ready for it. And I read it, and I'm like, gosh, because he keeps talking about the creator and the spiritual realm. And I just thought it was so religious. And I was like, listen, it felt more like a cult reading than anything. But as I gained awareness, I understand what the words mean. So for all of you that are going to jump into this, just understand the words that Eckhart Tolle uses. It's a different vocabulary than probably you're used to. It's a different vocabulary than most books, but most spiritual books are. So that would just be my number one thing to all of you out there before we actually get into it. The first 2 chapters, Ryan.
Okay.
So I'll let you take it back because I know you got some slides to put up and some go.
Yeah, let's do it, baby. So, chapter 1, it's really the introduction, but the kind of title of this is going to be "You Are Not Your Mind," and this is a great introduction for anybody who's kind of getting into this. And for me, I like to pick passages out of what we've kind of read here. And there's one thing, and this is on chapter 15, when he's talking really about enlightenment. And he says that,
Page
in
15.
page 15, yeah, my apologies. Enlightenment is a state of a wholeness, of being at one and therefore at peace. At one with life in its manifested aspect, the world, as well as your deepest self and your life unmanifested. At one with being. And what I get from that, Dan, is Buddha says this quite a bit, and he mentioned this in earlier passages, where it's like, the to get enlightenment is the end of suffering, but there's no actual positive part. There's no explanation of what is suffering from there. And for me, when I look at enlightenment, it's like I kind of go into like meditation a bit, right? Like people think like
Mhm.
meditation is about clearing the mind and like just having at peace and stuff like that. And when you go meditate for that very first time, you start thinking, I need to, did I turn the iron off? Did I turn the stove off? Did I lock the front door? And the way that I've kind of manifested my life is that when I do the meditation and everything like that, I think of it like I'm standing on the side of the road of the highway and I'm seeing all these cars, and all those cars represent thoughts. And just like the highway, you let those cars go. Cars, trucks, vans. Like anytime you see a truck, we're working logistics. Anytime you see a truck, you're like, hey, I know that company. And then you forget about, not as you forget about it, but you move on to the next thing. And for me, that enlightenment that I'm still seeking in life, and that's really what hooked me in like chapter 1, reading this from there. Dan, would love to get your thoughts on chapter 1. You are not your mind.
So the thing that I mean, obviously I have enlightenment written down, but when he says everyone, regardless of material wealth or achievements, are beggars. We all have found our, if we have not found our true wealth, which is the radiant joy of being and the unshakable peace that comes with it. So what he's talking about is we all look outside for scraps of pleasure or fulfillment or validation or security or love, right? And that's when he gets into enlightenment. And enlightenment is the end of suffering with Buddha, is what I wrote down. Being in a state of now, of wholeness. And you see what I mean by going deep, right? I mean, this is chapter 1, my friends. Like this isn't halfway through the book where he's like, let's ease into this slow. Like he dives in inner stillness with mind and body. The separating is when we start thinking. And it's when we start, he says, when we start thinking, we're not at peace internally. Not because he says, and he goes on to say, we think about the future, the past. We're not in with the present. So what is that? We're looking outside for a future of pleasure, fulfillment, love, joy. We're looking in the past for scraps of pleasure, fulfillment, joy, instead of staying in the now. And I would encourage a lot of you to go to the new one on Audible, because it's set up like an interview, and the interviewers ask questions like, well, what do you mean by that? And Eckhart Tolle goes into a little bit more of an explanation that's in the original copy of the book. So I encourage you to do that. But, Ryan, for me, it's that sense of presence and disidentifying from your mind what meditation is, right? And it's creating those gaps, and the present moment holds the key to that liberation. Gosh, I can keep going here, brother, but I'm gonna, it's crazy. That I think was probably the second or third line in chapter 1. And I literally thought about it for the entire chapter, and I had to re-listen to the chapter because I was not paying attention. I was focused on that. And think about that for a second. So we all have these goals, these dreams, these ambitions, these desires. And a lot of the times we give up the pleasure of now for them. It's the way I read that. And the way I looked at it, and I said, whoa, hold on here. Am I giving up the ability to be happy internally with myself for a pursuit of something that ultimately is going to get me more things? Is it going to fulfill me internally? And by going over this chapter, I start thinking, and I again, when I step outside, I think of how many really wealthy people in the world there are that are so unhappy, right? And you start thinking about that part, and it's like, be happy with the now. And I can tell you, Ryan, we said it before the show. I'll tell you from a first moment when I started going downhill during treatment, those negative and evil thoughts, and like, why me? There's pedophiles out there in the world. I've done nothing to hurt anyone, and why me? And you start having all these thoughts, and it brought me down this evil rabbit hole. And like it just brings you right back. It's super cool.
Love that. If so, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page by going to YouTube and clicking on Sales Chatter Live. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification where you'll get the exclusive notifications every time we go live and upload new podcasts. Now let's continue with this episode. Love that. And
I cut off a little quick.
Yeah, we got to re-edit that one. But we're getting into chapter 2. And
yes,
it's not fair. Like, now that I'm thinking about this, it's not fair that we're doing like this. Like, there's so much value in the chapter 1, but that we can talk for hours about, right? But with that being said, we want everybody to kind of be involved in it as well. So chapter 2 is the consciousness, the way out of pain. And this one hit me like a brick stand, but I want to hear your thoughts on chapter 2 of this amazing book.
So the big things for me um, time and mind are inseparable. We need them to function in life. The mind tries to cover up the present. It's the origin of pain. Those were two statements that he made that really hit me. And when he said, stop creating time, always say yes to the present moment and say yes to life. And, you live there's only one place to live, and it's in the present moment. And I think consciously, subconsciously, if you've ever done any personal development or whatever, you know this. And, pain in the body takes the form of irritation, frustration, somber moods, anger, rage, depression, and a need for drama. It wants to survive on those emotions and those feelings. I look at that feeling of, drama, or anger, and you get cut off in a car on your way to work. And for half the day, you're talking about how this arsehole cut you off. And that arsehole goes on with their day, probably never even realizing they cut you off. But he or she, whoever cut you off, is controlling your day, and they don't even know they're controlling your day because you're feeding off of that anger. And to me, when he says, stand back and be a watcher, and it goes back to exactly what you just said about chapter 1. You're standing on the highway and you're just allowing the vehicles to go by, and it's again, I mean, Ryan, he starts out really deep. It's going to be challenging for people to stay with it, right? But I think if you do, you're going to experience so much joy after. So just stay with it, my friends, if it's challenging.
100%.
And I can go on, but
yeah, no, of course. We gotta, and it's great. And you love the book when you're able to actually expand on this, and you want to talk about this for hours. And for me, when I was reading this, Dan, I had to do a couple of this chapter specifically. And the reason why was that the origin of fear is really what stuck out to me, and the way that he kind of said to it. And he made an analogy by saying that you don't put your hand if there's a fire. You don't put your hand in it because like you're fearful of it. You don't put your hand in it because you're gonna get burned. And when he compared that to, when we're looking at our egos, or we're just kind of like, there's one thing that he says here was like the psychological condition of fear is divorced from any concrete or true immediate danger. It comes in many forms, which is unease, worry, anxiety, nervousness, tension, dread, and phobia, and so on. And fear is there's fear and there's ego. And when I look at fear itself, it's like, with our business, let's call it, but like we had a milestone, and that was supposed to kind of happen as well. And that fear, that anxiety, like when we first kind of started, it's like, hey, is it going to happen? And then it's like, when is it going to happen? And then are people going to be, and with anything, with your logistics business, if you're picking up that phone, because even though it's a book club, we want to relate it back to sales professionals, because you guys are the reasons why we make the show. When you're afraid to make that phone call thinking that, oh no, they're not going to pick up, you're putting out that energy into the universe anyway. So when they don't pick up, you're going to say, they never pick up the phone. Have you ever, I don't know, for me as well, Dan, like I've sat next to sales reps and they're like, yeah, people aren't picking up the phone today on a Friday, so they make that excuse to, hey, let me go take a 2-hour lunch. And then let's duck out of the office at 3-4 o'clock and things like that. And, when I think of that fear, that anxiety that you have in your mind that, you're getting prepped up, I still get the jitters or anything like that before making a sales call. But it's only natural with that, and I understand it, but I don't let that fear run me, right? I don't need to, like, if people do different things, and like I said, there's so many things. He talks about the physical pain in this one. He talks about fear, and the ego as well, like the ego search for wholeness, which was like really, really good, because like for me, just like we had an intention that you mentioned earlier in the show, every time I read a book, Dan, I have an intention for that book, regardless, even if I've never read it before and I don't know where the book is going to take me, my intention is to be like, okay, I want to understand XYZ better. And for me with this book, when it's coming down to a whole, because we're getting to get in chapters, I just want to understand my ego more, and then that fear. Because like you said, Dan, yesterday, like there's 10 to 20 different levels more of Ryan, so I'm doing this to my family, I'm doing a disservice to my community, I'm doing a disservice to my God, I'm doing a disservice to everybody around the world if I do not unlock my potential. So
and the worst part about it, Ryan, is you're doing a disservice to Ryan a year from now.
Yes.
Over everyone else, even your God. you're doing a disservice to yourself, because, okay, again, we were all put on this planet to be the best we can be and not settle into be, simple, easy, sedentary, comfortable. I don't believe that. I believe we're all set out. If one person can do it, everyone can do it.
Yeah.
And Ryan at Christmas needs you, Ryan, right now, to step up to the plate. And I'd say that the same thing about Dan at Christmas, same thing about any viewer. Look at yourself in the mirror and say, at Christmas, I need me to be stepped up, or else I'm going to continue to live exactly the way I'm living, wishing I was living some way else. Because I'm sorry, we all wish for something better for us, or for our kids, or for our family, or you know what I mean? Like all of us. I don't think there's a single person out there that doesn't, because that's where dreams, ambitions, and goals and pursuit of happiness come in, right? I mean, in the end, it's a pursuit of freedom, not freedom from like, the day to day that we must have. It's a fight. It's a pursuit of freedom, happiness, harmony.
And you say that, and I love that, because like I lead off like the last two lines of the chapter 2, which basically says, like death is stripping away all of that is not you. So stripping away that fear, stripping away that ego. And the secret of life is to die before you die, and to find that there is no death. And that's a different conversation there, because like you can actually go like talk about that physically. But like you said, a year from now, that Ryan at Christmas, that everybody who's out there who needs to kind of step up, and like they need to be the one in their family to do that. They
Yeah.
need to they owe it to themselves. And it brings us to like the our thoughts on it. So Dan, what were your thoughts on these, not necessarily the book overall, but just really the 2 chapters as you kind of ingested both of them, versus like reading and the audiobook as well?
So the overarching thing that for me was presence. Finding the present moment in everything. Like I mean, it goes back, like feel the moment, feel your breath. He says, when you get in your car, stop and feel your breath. Look around you and take in the materials and everything. And he said something so simple that we all do 15, 20 times a day. When you wash your hands, when's the last time you actually felt the water? That we all do 15, 20 times a day, right? When you wash your hands. You got a little feedback there, brother. But like, think about that. When's the last time you actually felt the water? What it feels like on your hands to wash them, what the soap feels like. We just go and we're, off to the next thing.
Well, we're thinking about while we're washing our hands, we're thinking about something completely different. We're thinking about the next task, right? Like, I got to wash these hands. Like, for me, when I wash my hands, it's really because after I put up my dog food and stuff like that, I'm like, okay, well, I got to go do this now. So I love that you said that, Dan, because so that actually brings up to this. I want to ask you this, and we didn't discuss this, so I'm throwing you for curveball here. But what is 2 lessons that you've learned? Well, sorry, let's do this. What's 1 lesson from each chapter that you're going to apply to your life starting today?
First lessons from chapter 1 is disidentifying with my mind. That's something I have to really get a grip on, because I don't think I have a full grip on it yet. When he talked about, when you can't be creative, thinking only plays a supportive role in creativity. I always thought creativity was thinking, like thinking about these amazing things and being, but it's when you disassociate with your mind. And I had to think about that for a moment, because I've been involved in editing where I don't think I thought for like 2 hours. It was just like things were flowing, and you ever been in the zone and all of a sudden like 2-3 hours passes? That's what happens when you separate your thinking. And I didn't realize that until he said, even if you look at the likes of Einstein, and it brought me back to Edison. Edison had a dream that became the light bulb. He couldn't figure out how to keep the filament lit until he realized you have to suck all the air out. And like coals in a fire that are covered in sand, when you uncover them, they are whole. right? Whereas if you leave them uncovered, they turn to dust. So that's what actually gave him the idea to suck all the air out of the light bulb, the first light bulb, which created the incandescent light as we know it today. So for me, it was that was chapter one, is separating that and really taking in the moment. For me, chapter two is accept and act. And I've highlighted here, regardless of what's happening in the present moment, accept it and then act. Because I think a lot of the times when things are going wrong for us, even right, we don't accept it. Okay, we're gonna have a bad day. Everybody does, Ryan. No matter how much of spirituality you have a bad day. Your bad day might be better than some people's good days, but you still have a bad day. And accept it, stand on the side of the highway. He even uses a form like that where you stand to the side and you observe your thoughts. Right. So I look at that, like you said, observe the vehicles going by, accept it. And then in my version, I would say respond instead of act. Okay, that's going to happen today. That's fine. See, Jackson agrees with me.
Yeah, he agrees with you. He's barking at the dogs, and for me, the chapter one lesson that I kind of do is like, understand what the false self is like. We kind of get into that mindset of like, that false things. Let me just get her right down here.
It's okay.
Sorry about that. But understand the false, because sometimes we start
that dog
overthinking.
really listens. Look at that.
She's got the e-collar on. And that was something we had to gotta work on. Just you gotta make sure you do the things, and understanding that the false pride, I think, too, as well. We get in that mindset, like you're just talking about, when we're driving and understanding things. I've been doing my morning workouts. I actually walk to the gym, Dan, because like my gym is literally less than 5 minutes away. And the habit that I've done in the past 2 weeks, Dan, is that I don't actually listen to anything when I'm walking. So I give myself that ability to, like, when I go walk to the actual gym, say hello to the person who works the front desk, not just like, AirPods in and just ignore them. And then when I get to the treadmill to do my warm up, then I'll put on like a Alex Ramosi or Ed Milet. But then once I'm done my workout, as soon as I'm done my workout, I put those AirPods back in the case, and then I want to observe the nature. So that's gonna be my lesson for sure. Is just understanding what's true and false. And then for basically the chapter 2, I think my lesson that I think identifying, like you were kind of saying, identifying and acting. I think identifying what ego thoughts that I have, and then understand and recognizing it, right? So here's what I compare it to, Dan. I was diagnosed with sleep apnea, I want to say 1.5 years ago, because I've had horrible sleep. I wake up with blood in my throat and all this stuff. And the reason why people have sleep apnea is because they snore, and snoring is mouth breathing. And I got the CPAP machine, and my life has completely changed. But the point that I'm trying to make with this is that for me, in my daily life, I've had to like recognize the times where like I breathe through my mouth and then stop that. So I realized like, hey, I should only be using my mouth really to talk or eat. Right. And those are the only two things. So now that I'm more aware of, hey, I'm breathing into my mouth. Hey, stop that. Breathe through your nose. Because these unconscious things that you're doing, because we could have been doing this podcast. Let's say I'm listening to you and I'm breathing through my mouth the whole time. Right. I'm defeating the purpose of having the CPAP machine. So for me, it's going to be identifying with like the ego mind, because it only brings like negativity and like, honestly, it's just turmoil, right? Like, why do I want to be here? It's like Steve Harvey says, brother, and I'll lead with this one. It's just that he says that if you're going through hell, why would you want to stop? Why wouldn't you just keep going? Because why would you want to be stagnant and stop in hell? So great choice. I thoroughly enjoy these first 2 chapters, and I'm looking forward to the next 2 next week with you, brother.
Me too, buddy. Wayne Dyer said something in his inspiration speech. Instead of motivation, he talks about inspiration, and he says ego is edging God out.
Yes.
Something to think about. So I know. Okay, so I gotta share with you a funny thing on a happy note before we end out here. So when I started to think I had sleep apnea, I got a machine, and at that point, I had carpal tunnel in both hands. It was before my surgeries, so I used to have to wear wrist locks, like lock my wrist like this, and I got a machine on. So I'd lie in bed and I'd look at my wife and I'd go, huh? And she's like, yeah, not a chance, because I look like Darth Vader. I had to. So we would joke about that. So, hey, honey, love you. So listen, I think that went really well for our first book club. Encourage all of you, really. I mean, it's, and you know what? Join the conversation too. Don't just read the book, join the conversation, because I think the more we talk about it and the more we chat about it, the more these ideas come to fruition in our head, and it kind of um, separates that I'm unclear to clarity. I think that's probably the best way I could say when we read books, right? There's a reason I used to read books and then connect with the author and say, I want to interview you, you know?
Yeah, we gotta get Eckhart
Um,
on. We gotta get Eckhart on, man. We gotta manifest that, man.
yeah,
We gotta get him
yeah,
on here
yeah,
for the final chapters.
yeah.
Maybe we'll
And
do a live reading.
yeah, and if you've ever heard him talk, he's very chill. Like he's very chill. It's so cool. So I actually have to put the audiobook on time 2 times because he talks so relaxed. I'm like, okay. But anyways, listen, Sales Chatter Live, head over to YouTube, subscribe to our channel, head over to, and let me get the banner up here, saleschatterlive.com. We got great tools. We will, you know what I'm going to do? I'm actually today I'll put up a little section about the book club and a place you can go to grab the book and all that kind of stuff, and you get caught up. And then maybe we'll throw some show notes up there, Ryan.
Yeah, I'm looking
A
forward
little
to it.
bit
I
of
think.
kind of what you and I think of the chapters, and kind of walk through the next couple of weeks on the website. So if you ever missed it, you can go back to the website, download our notes, and kind of read it from there. I think it's a good
That's
idea.
that's a
Not that I
perfect
want to
idea
add more work to our plate, but it
for our
is what it
people,
is.
man.
Yeah, that's it. Absolutely.